So yesterday we concluded with the process of photosynthesis, where we saw that we have different pathways, pathways in C3, pathways in C4 plants, and also pathways in what we call CAM plants, and we saw that we have some sugars there, and we ultimately said that photosynthesis gives us sugars. Now, these plants actually also need amino acids, need nucleic acids, need the proteins, and they also need fatty acids. So where do they get these things from? That's the question we are attempting to answer in this presentation. So the main point for this discussion is for you to know that in this process of photosynthesis, we have what we call intermediates. When you say intermediates, we are basically referring to some of the compounds that involved in the whole pathway. Okay, so we have an intermediate that we actually call glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. This is actually produced in Calvin cycle, and the process of producing this, it is actually coming from PGA, okay, phosphoglyceraldehyde. So from phosphoglyceraldehyde, that is PGA, we can get we can get G3P, which is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Okay. So from PGA we get glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and it is this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate that is actually the starting point for synthesizing the other organic products that I've just mentioned about. So the production of this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is that you will have the Calvin cycle having to move 3 times, because we actually say that for you to produce glucose, Calvin cycle has to move 6 times. And for this one, it is moving 3 times because we are dealing with the 3-carbon compound here. Okay, so what happens is that we actually need 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to actually form 1 glucose molecule. And like I've just said, that means that for you to get 1 molecule of glucose, Calvin cycle has to go through 6 times. Okay, so glucose can actually be made in a way that we are reversing glycolysis. So that means that you're moving from the products going backwards. That's the reverse glycolysis that you're talking about for us to get glucose. It is this glucose that can actually be converted to sucrose, starch, and cellulose. All these are basically carbohydrates. We all know that these are all carbohydrates. Okay, so this is the precursor. When we say a precursor, we are meaning a substance from which we can get other substances. So glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is used for making amino acids, fatty acids and lipids, proteins and nucleic acids. Okay, these processes happen in cells and can happen in the chloroplast, can happen in the cytoplasm, can happen in the nucleus. Okay, so what is important at this point to know is that sucrose is the main transport form of carbohydrates in plants. Okay, can you give a reason for that? Sucrose is inactive, so you can easily transport it, and it is not that large. So if you are to compare, for example, transporting starch compared to sucrose, you could go with sucrose. So those are some 2 reasons that you can give for why sucrose is the main transport form of photosynthetic products. Okay, so we all know from chemicals of life that actually starch is the storage form of carbohydrates in plants. So this sucrose can be converted into starch. Okay, and sometimes you can have some plants that can actually store sucrose. So this is basically to emphasize the fact that what is stored depends on the plant species that you're talking about. And for example, in the sugarcane, you have high sucrose. Okay, and also in sugar beet, that's what you have. And like I said, for you to get carbohydrates from photosynthesis, it's about the reverse of glycolysis, and we have explained that sucrose is the transport form of carbohydrates, and starch being the main storage product of photosynthesis. How are lipids synthesized? You will have this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate being converted into acetyl-CoA and finally giving you fatty acids. These processes can happen in the cytoplasm and chloroplast. We have triose phosphate. Okay, this is also an important compound that can be turned into glycerol. And then, of course, when you have fatty acids and glycerol, you have the lipids. And then proteins, when are they made? How do plants make their proteins? So we know that the proteins should have, they have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The proteins should have those, and they get these from the triose phosphate and also glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. But also know that proteins contain nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. So where do they get this? Basically from the soil, by absorbing these elements or nutrients from the soil. Okay, so they absorb them as nitrates, sulfates, or even phosphates. Okay, and then for nitrogen specifically, we have outlined the steps from through which this nitrogen is actually incorporated into the protein. You cannot have the protein without nitrogen. So what happens is that you have nitrates being converted into nitrites, and then this being converted to ammonia. Remember, ammonia is very toxic, so it has to be dealt with very fast. And this happens through incorporating this ammonia into the Krebs cycle. Through Krebs cycle intermediates to form amino acids. Okay, and this is an example through which we can actually form glutamate. Transamination is another process where the amino group is actually transferred from one amino acid to another, such that you have another amino acid. So this is also an important process through which plants actually get amino acids that they actually need.